This Choircast podcast is being brought to you by Rituals for Heretics. For millennia, people have been meeting deep psychological needs through religious ritual and meditation practices. Rituals for Heretics takes rituals and meditation practices from all kinds of religions and deletes the God part of it while leaving the psychological work that is being done so that you can put whatever you believe or don't believe about God back into the ritual or meditation practices. Get your copy today on Amazon or wherever you purchase books.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with John and Nat Turney and Bethany Shea.
This is what we call hanging out with John and Bethany. I'm Nat. I got nothing. All my theme songs sound the same. I did feel bad. The only thing I felt bad about missing our interview with Keith was I didn't get to do our catching up with Keith little jingle.
Yeah, and I just didn't have the balls to try.
I didn't think about it until our editor was like, "Oh man, I really missed Nat singing catching up with Keith." And it's true because the little catchphrase at the end is like, "Take a look. I bet he wrote another book in the time that it took," and he'd written like 3. Yeah. He's the most prolific guy. Keith Childs, if you're listening, you're probably not. You're probably writing a book.
Probably.
Right. Yeah.
I actually was putting a bunch of books away. By the way, this is the podcast that we're doing today because our guest had to reschedule. So you're stuck with us and we're just going to shoot the bull and see what's up. But I was putting books away and realized I have like 2 full shelves of books that have come from guests. And then I was just sort of trying to put them away. And then I had like half of the row of the bookcase with Keith Child's books.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was like, dang.
That's amazing to like come up with that much content and to be able to like have an idea, research it. And it's not like he's talking about silly things or like easy subjects. He's just like quantum theology and makes your brain just ooze out of your ears. I don't even understand it.
Yeah, I'm impressed. He really hit on something with the Jesus series.
Right.
That whole Jesus series was really clever. He could have made like one massive, like 600-page book, but instead it was 7, 100-page books, which is smart. I think that was my issue with my book. It was too big. I tried to put too much into, no one's going to sit down and read a 300-page book and go.
I haven't read your book, Matt. What was your book like? What was it like? Like, what was it about?
My book was sort of equal parts autobiography and sort of deconstruction story. So that's what it was. So I wrote the bulk of it in 2021. So where are we at? 26. So 5 years ago, I finished it. Took about 6 months to a year. I broke my arm in the middle of all that.
Oh, dang.
And I'm a clumsy son of a bitch. We had just opened the coffee shop and I was going a little crazy. My wife and I were working just stupid hours. And I literally fell down the steps of my shop and landed weird and hyperextended my elbow and broke my elbow. We've had Meg Calvin on the show. She was my writing coach that I actually had hired to help me out with this. And I called her up and we had a meeting once a week. And I was like, "Oh, boo-hoo, won't be able to write for a while. Can I get an extension?" She said, "I'll give you a week."
A week? Did you have to voice text it or how did you figure that out?
Yeah. So for about a month, I just did talk to text, whatever, dictation on my computer. So it's weird. I don't know if anybody else would notice. I noticed the book starts out one way. In the middle section, it gets very conversational. Because it's just me going, okay, chapter 3, here we go. But no, it was me trying to kind of flesh out my process of unraveling just years and years and years of indoctrination and bullshit, which is ostensibly what I think deconstruction is. I think that's the way most people honestly use it. There's a little blurb in the very beginning kind of contrasting it with the more cerebral, Derrida version, which is not the same, right? I mean, it's Derrida's concept of deconstruction was more about literary criticism, and it was about divorcing words of unintentional and intentional hierarchies, and what's the other word? And these sort of imposed binaries. Okay. So when you say so there was some of that. There's an overlap inside of religion where you say things like saved, and then the automatic binary to that is unsaved, and then you've already sort of assigned a value to those things. Saved is good, unsaved is bad.
Totally.
So there is that sense of, hey, we have to figure out how to get these words sort of wrested from these inserted meanings. And anyway, that for Derrida, that was it. But for me, it was more like, it was much more mechanical than that. It was, I'm 40 something years old. This is the way I was taught. And it's time to disassemble this whole thing and find out what's good and what's bad, keep the stuff that's life-giving, throw away the stuff that's hurtful, which honestly turned out to be a lawful lot. So John and I have similar stories separated by a couple of decades. But in that, I don't know, John, you can answer this for yourself, but for me, the first thing I started to question was the concept of an eternal hell. And that it's so far removed from my thought process now that it's funny that I ever struggled with it. But it was a hard one, in the very beginning to sort of like go off and go, oof, because part of it is that thing that, well, you mean the bad people aren't going to get what's coming to them. And then the other part of it was, okay, well, let's think about this with a degree of logic and wonder. I think a lot of this started to happen when I became a parent, and I'm sure you both can relate to this, where if you ever honestly ask yourself the question, what could my kids do to deserve that? At what point would I ever say, not only have I given up on you utterly, but now I want to see you suffer. And I want to see you suffer forever. So it doesn't even pass the initial test of proportionality. That doesn't make sense. So there was that. I got a little heady for a while, and I really started to read a lot of people and started to read a lot of sort of church fathers and early writings, and started really sort of diving into atonement theories and different doctrines. But a lot of it just came down to, and I hate the term common sense because it just, but there is a certain amount of common sense that comes in that says how we treat people matters. And if we're supposed to be following a God that supposedly is trying to show us how to live, how do I follow that God if this is how he deals with his creation? And, we get stories of total annihilation and destruction. So we have the flood stories and we have all the genocidal stories. And by the way, if that's not bad enough, if you really piss him off, and by piss him off, I mean, don't love him back. You can also count on being burned alive for the rest of eternity. So anyway, so that was that. Part of that was just based on that. A lot of that book was also written when John and I first started the podcast. And so I was getting a lot of influence from people we were interviewing as well. And so I've mentioned Bayo Okomolafe before, and I wish we could get him back on the podcast. Maybe we can. But just a super, super smart guy, interesting guy. And he was sort of the guy that floated the idea, because I was going to do a, first part of the book, deconstruction, second part, reconstruction. Yeah. And he was like, why?
Why reconstruct?
Yeah, because I don't know that we know how, and his right. Whole thing was, and I think he's right to a point, that we'll only fall into the same patterns we fell into. And I've seen this happen. John and I've done this with, a handful of different movements over the years. And, all of a sudden grace comes around and we're all like hyper grace, love grace, blah, blah, blah. And then you go too far with that and you plant a flag, and that has to be deconstructed. And right. So his whole thing was, maybe that's the job of a future generation that might have some more originality and might have some different ways of thinking about it. And maybe we just need to sort of sit back. So
what do you do in that middle space then? If he's saying reconstruction is something for the future, what does it mean for not just for you, but for people in that space nowadays? Or what does that look like?
That's the scary. Bayo called it the Atlantic middle, and it's scary. It's you feel a bit adrift. How
does it affect you today? Like, do you still feel a little bit adrift?
I love feeling adrift.
Okay. Yeah.
I no longer crave the anchor and the pier, and I don't want any of that shit. I don't want it. So no, it was scary for a minute. It would have been 10 times, maybe 100 times worse if my wife had not been right along there with me going, yeah, screw this. I'm very, very, very lucky that she was in the same place I was. A lot of this happened within a few years of my daughter getting really sick. And there was just we were already sort of in the process when that happened. And so I think I remember saying to somebody that I don't recommend deconstruction in the midst of crisis. It's that, however, you don't get to pick your spot. And so it was, some of that was really helpful. The hard part and the part that if I'm honest, I still struggle with is I didn't even know how or if I should pray. That's tough. I'd already come to the point where I didn't feel like I could count on anybody except my family at that point. I knew the church wasn't going to be there for me. It's very transactional. Most evangelical churches, even mine. So I wasn't really worried about that too much, but there was a sense of loss when you're like, okay, well, at least in the past, I knew I could pray, or I could have others praying. So that was difficult, but I don't know. What do you think, John? You have a similar experience with that?
I mean, similar, yes. Different. I mean, mine, because my deconstructions happened so long ago that I had a hard time. Well, I had a hard time with hell. Same with you. And I asked the really obvious, I guess they're obvious questions like, well, if hell exists and you never hear the word Jesus or the name Jesus, so you're born, you live, you die somewhere else. You're not lucky to be born in a place that has Christian values and all that kind of stuff. Where do you go? So you go to hell because you never heard the name Jesus? You never were able to ask him into your heart? These are the questions I asked and was told that these were not good questions to ask at the time. So I was like 18 when I'm like, you all can pound sand. I'm done. So I felt I did my church thing. But when it came for me, what it was, the loss was community, because I had been raised in a way that you didn't look outside the church for friendship.
Right. Same.
So you would find your friendship inside the church, and outside the church were the people that you'd be nice to.
That's the world, man.
Right. So what I lost was community and friendship. And that was difficult for me.
It's a tough spot. Go ahead, Bethany.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, Nat, you were talking about feeling anchorless in some ways, and how it's actually really a delight for you at this time, like to be in that middle space without just kind of floating in some ways. And then, John, you were saying how feeling like you've lost community within the context of a church setting has been something that is a hardship, even though you wouldn't want to go back to a church as you've known it. What would it look like to be in to create anchorless community, if that makes sense? Like a space of people, like a group of people that you can wrestle through life, faith, love, human complexity, and walk together without having to have answers all the time. Is that even a possibility for either of you? Or is that even something that you would want? I
mean, it's possible. I do that with the friends I still have who still talk to me. And we do. And I had dinner last night with one of my good friends, Todd, and who was my associate pastor for a couple of years. And we instantly talk of deep things, but we're both traveling down that same road of going, part of what drove me was a disdain for certainty. And I'm still in that place where the people that annoy me the most are the ones who are the most certain. It's just so fucking arrogant, Totally. It's like, so it's why I don't vibe with, I don't vibe with many political figures at all, because they all fall victim to that same trap of needing to project a certain amount of certainty. If we do this, then this will happen. The certainty in in certain evangelical spaces is, if I do this, God is obliged to do X, Y, Z, A, B, C. All the while declaring that God is, omnipotent. I don't know how you square that circle,
But I would say, Nat, in a lot of ways, you speak with certainty in your uncertainty. Like it's like you double down in the uncertainty that you have, or your political leaning is the most important one, or the most valuable one, or the one that is most right. And so even though you want to project this idea of like there's no certainty, you seem very certain in that.
Yeah, I'm certain of my uncertainty.
Yeah.
No, you're right. That's another place of dissonance that you kind of have to wrestle with a bit. I don't want to be uncertain and unsure to the point where I'm completely indecisive. And I can't decide to go left or right, or go straight, or do this, or So there's a decisiveness that comes from. Here's the one thing that I noticed with a lot of conversations we've had with writers in particular, especially thinkers. Not every writer's a thinker. Everyone we've had on the podcast is interesting. Some have sent me home with my brain just spinning because they're just like, you know what I mean? So, but I have found that there's a distinct difference between the morals I was raised with and the ethics I was never taught.
Tell me more what you mean by that.
So for me, growing up, morality. Can I say what that morality was? Morality was always an external thing. It was, to put it in its real simple terms, it was you don't drink, smoke, or chew, or go with girls that do. It was purity culture. It was how do you look when you walk out of my house and you represent my family? Which was a very common thing for my mom and dad both to say. Fairly prominent in our community. Every time you walk out the door, you carry my name. I've said that to my kids. Oh my God. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. However, the older I got, the more I realized people could externally act a certain way and ethically just be rotten to the core. You could still be a complete dick and check all the boxes. I remember I worked at a video store when I was 19 or 20. John remembers Old Town Video.
Yep.
Back in the olden days, we had to go to the store to rent a VHS cassette tape.
Was that in Eureka, Old Town Video?
It was in Eureka, yeah. When it was,
Nice.
It first started as Old Town Billiards.
Nice.
It was a pool hall that then became a video store. That it was a weird place. It was a weird scene. But anyway, ended up working there for a while. Well, as many video stores had in the olden days, there was the curtain that held behind it all of the all the
beaded
dirt
curtain.
Stuff. Yes, this was a leaden curtain. No, anyway, and I was shocked at how many people from my church showed up, and leaders in my church would show up with stacks of videos to take home for the weekend, and like not look me in the eye, not make eye contact with me. I'm like, oh, aren't you an elder in my church? That's cool, crazy. Go on with your bad stuff. I mean, I'm not kink shaming you, but come on, man, Mr. Fair. So for me, I started moving on from whatever this sort of pedestrian sense of morality is, which is very superficial, into what does a Christian ethic look like, or what are ethics at all? And it had more to do with how we treated one another. It had more to do with what is our responsibility in the world. We would routinely sort of like poke fun at environmentalists because they were all tree hugging hippies, and it turns out we're supposed to take care of the planet. Turns out it wasn't my job to critique and judge people who weren't like. Anyway, so that's a harder thing to define. It's a little more nebulous, right? And so I'm moving. In fact, might as well talk about it here. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm trying to write a book. I want to write a book because I'm moving away from formal religion. I don't think that works. But I really do think that Jesus was a very good humanist. And so I'm trying to figure out if I can jive the teachings of Jesus with secular humanism and find a place that meets in the middle and say, hey, if you still are fascinated with this person of Jesus, which I still am to some degree, and you can find within his teachings some things that resonate with you and that are timeless, I think you'll find at the heart of all of it, you'll find a sense of humanism, which is the point, I think, of the gospel, is that we elevate the human experience and we elevate human flourishing. And the way we do that is by adhering somewhat to the teachings of Jesus. Does that make sense at all, or am I just blabbering?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, to take care of the least of these is something that Jesus said, but is something that is ethically right.
Yeah.
And I don't think you have to be a Christian to understand.
No, not at all.
That is an important thing to do.
Yeah.
So,
well, what do we, when we think about Jesus becoming human, why? What was the point of the incarnation? What was the point of Jesus coming to earth as a person, as a human? And I said for a long time before I think I understood what it meant, was that he was trying to show us what it means to be human. So if Jesus can exemplify the human experience for us, well then, what does that look like? How do we walk that out? So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I don't know I don't know. There's the Humanist Manifesto is a very short document. It's a handful of tenets. It's not really a religion, although it's sort of religious in structure. But it has a lot to do with autonomy, has a lot to do with our interconnectedness and the fact that we are social creatures, and we have we do better when we do well together. We do better. I can't remember who it was. There was an anthropologist years ago, and I saw a short. I've seen this on Facebook and other places, but there was somebody asked her what was the first sign of human civilization, and they expected to see things like tools and villages and things like that. She said, no, the first sign we see of this kind of human culture is a healed bone, and it talking about a prehistoric 10,000-year-old whatever Australopithecine or something, but somebody stuck around long enough to not let him die. Somebody stuck around long enough to bind up that person's wounds and to let that bone heal, and then to continue being part of their civilization. So animals obviously don't do that, at least not lower order animals. I think some primates might. So I'm like, that's an interesting thing. Why would you do that? From an evolutionary standpoint, why? Oh, because in the long run, we succeed or we fail as a species. We either rise or we fall as a people. And so it drives me nuts to see so many people not give a shit about their fellow human beings, So I don't know.
So why write a book about the humanist of Jesus instead of like one about Gandhi or another great human? Like, why Jesus for you?
Because I'm an American. This is the milieu in which I live. This is where I was born. This is where I was raised. I don't feel like I have enough authority to speak on. And I think Gandhi would be a decent example of that, although there are things that came out about him later that are pretty fucking ugly. So there was a guy that probably talked the talk more than walked the walk. There's quite a few stories about him not being a very good human in some ways. It's really hard. You have to be pretty radical. And there are those. I listen to them. I hear them on occasion, to really think of Jesus as a bad person. Most people recognize that there's something to, at least the way the things he's reported to have said in the Gospels. There's something that resonates. There's something, and probably a blessing he lived a short enough life that we didn't find out. So part of it is just that's the culture I was raised in. That's the place I feel like I have some authority to speak on. And the other is, I don't know of any, but I just don't know. I don't know enough about Hinduism. I don't know about Buddhism. I guess you could you can't, I couldn't really talk about the humanism of Muhammad, peace be upon him, without talking about, the 9-year-old wife. So there's some problems there, but I don't know. I part of me just wants to see if I can bring some convergence to those things. It's, hey, this thing works here. This thing works here. You don't have to ditch everything. Because I don't know. Everyone's deconstruction story is different. I've talked to a handful of people who have dabbled in atheism and it didn't take. And that's cool. I've talked to some, for them, that was the most logical conclusion. Was at the end of all of this, I no longer believe in the magic man in the sky. Because, and I get that. I think I get that propensity to say, well, if I do all of that, I advocate everything to him, this nebulous thing, and I no longer have to take any responsibility for the things that I'm responsible for. And so
I see that as like original sin, that if I can blame my actions upon the fact that I just was born as a sinner, it's not my fault. I was born as a sinner. It's like we don't have to take accountability for ourselves. And people do that all the time. I'm curious about, like, when you were talking about this sense of like morality and ethics and how you were able to kind of differentiate those two things. I was thinking about, for myself, like how many people have opinions about other Christians, and how oftentimes Christians are the ones that are most critical of each other and most demonizing of each other. And I don't know, I'm just like wondering, how did you how do you move around that? Coming from a place of being raised in a specific way and then starting, like being involved in different church ministries and then starting your own church and then leaving your own church. And like, how did you deal with those relationship dynamics and then what people assumed of you?
Yeah, that's tough. First of all, I recognize that we're all hypocrites. As Paul might have said, I am the chief hypocrite. I know I don't live up to my own standards ever. I know that's true. And so part of that had to start with that recognition that even my own ideals, I often fail to live up to. But I don't know, there's something happened. It was almost like I was in the Matrix for a while, and then all of a sudden I got unplugged, and all of a sudden there was an ability to see that this is all just surface level performance. It was so performative. That was hard. And that was hard to stick around for. And I did for too damn long. I watched it. My wife is way more attuned to this stuff than I am. And she was like, these guys are full of shit, right? These people are full of shit. I'm like, oh, but I was so sort of stuck inside my own stuff anyway. Yeah, I don't know. It's a challenge for sure. How do you deal with the stuff that's underneath the surface that most likely most people won't ever know about you? The decisions that you make. I mean, I know you, Bethany. There's probably 90% of your life that is not for public consumption. That maybe a handful of people that are close to you know some of the struggles and some of the things that you go through. And I think that's most of us. We're ducks with our feet paddling on the water, going.
Well, and it's like how many people are making assumptions about why you went the way that you went. Or,
oh, yeah.
I know that people make assumptions about me all the time, but also I do that about them too. And it's like the more that I can see that in myself, like even assuming that they are thinking something poorly about me, that's not fair for me to place that on them. Like that's just my insecurity that is creating a storyline that might not or might exist. Who knows? It's not my business to know what they think about me. It's like, that's none of my business. But it is still something that I think the church has in the past, at least, and still does cultivate this sense of like, pointing fingers at the church down the street or the Christians that are deconstructing, and that we view them with suspicion. And so it's a lot that as you have deconstructed, I'm sure you've had to manage, both of you, in your own life.
Well, I mean, it's not known that I entered back into the faith, or whatever you want to call it, for a time, became an associate pastor, and then left again. And so I had to go through that scrutiny and that those kind of like side eye glances of people. Oh yeah.
The knowing looks.
The knowing looks of.
Well, and you're in the public a lot. You see a lot of people.
I do see a lot of people. Yes.
It's hard to hide.
But it was a difficult process to get over it.
Yeah.
In a way, right? To get to that point where you're like, yeah, people are going to have opinions about me, and it's not my place to give a shit about those opinions about me. And do I still get into those points? Oh, sure. Absolutely. I still get sucked into those. What are they thinking about me? They think I'm a backslider. They think I'm a heretic. They think I'm whatever. And it kind of eats at you a little bit, right? And so I don't know. I mean, how do you deal with it, Bethany?
It does affect me sometimes, and I think at least the church that I pastor, the non-denominational church that I pastor, especially, has kind of been known as like the black sheep of churches. As you guys know, I'm sure you've heard stories over
it's
the
all
years.
over the Facebook, all over.
And I think it's because, sometimes people don't know what to do with a progressive evangelical church. We're not mainline, and we're not conservative evangelical or Baptist. And so, but yeah, it feels there's a lot of familiarity for people who come from an evangelical background, definitely more ex-evangelical, if we're using that term, and definitely more progressive in most regards, but not like a mainline progressive where we have like the backing of a big denomination that we can fall back on, or that they make the rules and we just get to implement them. So I think because of that, a lot of conservative Christian pastors, churches, I don't want to say a lot. I know of like 2 or 3 in the area that are very uncomfortable and truly believe that we are leading people astray, and warn people from coming to our church, calling our church the gay church, actually, but not like a happiness, like ooh, they're the gay church. That's so cool. It's just like the whispered condemning sort of mentality with it. So I hear that, and everything in me wants to like come to my own defense, or let me tell you what we're actually about, or let's just have a conversation together. And what I've found is that, first of all, that's not the right response for me, because it's reactionary instead of being thoughtful. And then also, I'm not going to convince anybody anything that they don't already want to be convinced of. And what was the last thing? Oh, they don't want to actually meet with me. That's right. No, they don't care. They don't care.
And they don't care.
I've tried many times to meet with different pastors from the churches that are very suspicious of us, but they have been very closed because they already know what they believe about myself or the church and my husband. So yeah.
That was hard.
There's that certainty, right?
Yeah.
Certainty.
When I was literally on staff at a church in your area, I tried multiple times. I got invited once or twice to a couple of little like pastors gatherings. I was not invited back. Weirdly enough, but it never, and it always was the same handful of cliquey. It's very sectarian. It's very, it's just a weird. It's a strange thing. When we planted our church in the very, very beginning, we had some friends who were opening a restaurant, and we used their space for about 6 months while they were renovating, and it was great. It was really, really cool. But eventually, they threw us out because they didn't buy that for us. So we ended up, for a little while, right up until COVID, we ended up sharing space with a Presbyterian church in town that was very progressive. They let us use their gym for a few months for free. But I lost about half my members, and I lost like my worship leader, and who point blank asked me, are we becoming a rainbow church? Is that what we're doing? A rainbow flag church? Because this church is very progressive. And I'm like, I don't know what, and if we were, and he just never came back. So it's like, okay, well, all right, brother. I guess we know where you stand on that issue. It's very weird where people decide to draw lines. But here's the problem. If they decide to take the Bible seriously, and if they decide to take it literally, I don't know what choice they have.
Right.
I don't blame them for reading the script and saying, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here if I don't side with, this so-called plain reading of scripture. And the more I read the Bible, here's one thing I really have dived into recently that I realized as an evangelical Christian, I never did: the Old Testament. Because we were very New Testament people. The Old Testament's a shit show. I mean, it's a fucking horror story. So I've been sort of diving through that a little bit, going, you know what?
Okay.
It's very difficult. It's very hard to defend. I'm starting to understand why Marcion, if you know who Marcion was, right? So Marcion was I don't know what, 1st or 2nd century church father who was ousted as a heretic. His brand they were Marcionites. And essentially what they said was, Old Testament gone. That wasn't even God. That wasn't Yahweh. That was El, which actually it turns out he was right. There's a very, very weird history of how the Jewish God came to be the one and only God, and it really comes out of the Babylonian exile, where there was El, and then El Shaddai, El whatever, right. So anyway, long story short, his whole thing was that the God depicted in the Old Testament was not the creator God. He was a demiurge who was a lot more like pagan gods that they had encountered in Babylon. And he was the destructive one. He was the one who brought death and sin and corruption. And so pretty much for him, New Testament stood alone. Old Testament had nothing to do with it. So that was the label that got thrown around to anybody who was like, I only, honestly, for a little while, we pendulumed so far the other direction. I wouldn't even call us Christians. We were Paulians, because Jesus was pretty religious,
Yeah.
The Gospels, paint Jesus, at least in one light, as saying, like, he completely affirms the Old Testament law. So not one jot or tittle of this law will pass away. And if you don't follow the law and you teach others not to follow the law, you'll be the least in the kingdom of heaven. And the opposite is true. So there's nothing particularly germane to just Jesus. I don't know. Jesus and Paul are at odds in a lot of places. So anyway, we were sort of Paulians. But what does that have to do with any of that? I don't know. Just part of the deconstruction, I guess, is a commitment to study more, to know more about these things. And again, the more you read, the harder it is to defend. I mean, how do you defend slavery that God not only condones, but in some sense commands? How do you deal with the genocides where God says wipe everybody out except the virgins? You can take those with you. A global flood that kills everybody. And the list goes on and on and on. I think Brian McLaren did a really good job with his book. What's it called?
Faith After Doubt.
No, it was the one before that was called Why to Be a Christian or Why Not to Be a Christian.
Yeah. Yeah. What was that?
I'm messing the title up, but essentially was
a Christian. Yeah.
Yeah. The first half of the book was, all of the arguments against, and the second half of the book was, well, okay, these are things I can still hold on to. And I'm still kind of there digging through the rubble, finding out how much of that is good. And to be frank, how much of that I can't find other places. How much of that is unique to Jesus and the Gospels, and turns out, if you can find those ethics and you can find a way to live that is meaningful to you without all the trappings of the other stuff you have to apologize for constantly, maybe there's a place for that as well. I don't know. All that sounds very, I don't know. It's almost, it's not pessimistic. It's not even nihilistic. Although there's a certain amount of nihilism in my thought process these days. What do you think, John? Are you nihilist?
It sounds like you are somebody who is still figuring shit out. And that's where we're meant to be. I think, going back to that sense of certainty, that's like one of the worst things that we can do because it closes doors, it closes learning, it closes relationships when we are certain in how we believe. And then we have to insist everybody else believes likewise in order to be in relationship or friendship or belonging. But I love what you were saying, like people who are trying to figure out, especially about like LGBTQ stuff, if they want to take the Bible seriously, then they're going to have to come to terms with that. And so they're either in fully or they are out fully. And I think, I don't know, I think that like the thing that we're meant to do as, at least for myself as a Christian person, is to take the words of Jesus seriously and then filter everything through those.
100%. I think that's true. And so we can take some solace in the fact that Jesus never mentioned those things.
Correct.
Never talked about it one tiny bit.
Yeah. But we make the answer wherever you fall, either you're affirming or non-affirming, into its own form of idolatry. And then that's what we have to like lift up. And I was just talking about this morning on my TikTok about how most people, when they come to my church, they're not asking, what is your view on extreme poverty? What is your view on climate change? How is your church working with homeless youth this time around? Instead, they want to know where do you fall on human sexuality? And that's how they will determine whether that church is right.
And then the pet issue changes all the time, right? Because the goalposts always move. So now it's all about trans folks because they're an easy target. Never mind they're 1% to 2% of the population worldwide. Never mind. Matter of fact, here's a shitty fucking story. A trans woman killed herself in my town last week.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Turned out that she had been going to a local gym, not bothering a fucking person. Just going to the gym, going to the locker room, which was semi-private, changing and going home. Well, somebody outed her. And man, it went crazy. She got bullied. She got called out. She was already fragile because, as we know, trans people are, they're way more susceptible to suicidal ideation and things like that and self-harm. And it happens, just so happens, that's because of these kinds of things, the fear they live in. Being a trans person in Texas has got to be one of the most horrifying, scary, terrifying things, I should say. And so she had enough. There was a tiny bit of outpouring from people who knew her. The fact that she left a daughter behind. The fact that she, by all accounts, was a good person. And then there was the vitriol that just made me want to stop being a person. Like, I don't understand how the lack of empathy. It wasn't even couched in, man, I'm really sorry that happened. I don't agree with her lifestyle, whatever that means. Or insisting on misgendering her the entire time. You know, he's a he. We got to keep men out of women's spaces, as though rules and laws have ever kept men out of spaces they weren't supposed to be in. Didn't keep Trump out of the locker room, at the changing room, at the Miss Teen USA pageant. Sure shit wasn't going to keep an abuser out. So it just shocked me. And I'm still, it bothers me so much. But my curiosity is, well, what will be the next group of people that we will decide if we ever come to terms with trans people, which I don't know. I don't know. What will be the next group of people? And we'll just shift it to trans kids, and then we'll just say, well, fuck them. They don't get the healthcare they need. They don't get the things that they're supposed to have. I don't know. It just, what do we, I have come to the conclusion. I don't know if this is, I need to find a copy of Jefferson's Bible. Jefferson was supposedly not a Christian, famously not a Christian, but did have a version of the Bible where he pretty much blotted out all the shit he found offensive and left him with, a very short book. I have come to the conclusion that in order to be an earnest follower of Jesus to some extent, you do have to cherry pick. And how you do that cherry picking says a lot about you. What am I going to, you know what I mean? Because unfortunately, the Bible's full of contradictions. And how do you reconcile the contradictions? You either find an apologetic that works for you, so you can contort yourself into some kind of version of divine command theory that says, well, whatever God does is good because it's God. Or you say, now I'm going to prioritize, like I think we could very easily prioritize the words of Jesus. Let's just take the red letters and filter everything through those. And if what this story depicts about God does not jive with those teachings, I think we're fine to relegate it. I don't think we should erase it. I think we should know our history. But I don't know how I'm supposed to take a story about a loving God who, wipes out, entire civilizations because they displeased him a few hundred years ago. Anyway, I've rambled.
Yeah, no, I think so much of, in my perspective, especially as a pastor, my entire purpose is for people to know that they are loved and belong. And I think that that's what the story of Scripture tells us, that human beings are intrinsically valuable, have complete worth, and that we can find our identity in that sense of our belovedness. And the more that we can help people get to that, the more that I feel like I need to help people get to that place that they are beloved in of themselves, regardless of gay, straight, trans, anything. Like, that is the most important thing about them, not their gender identity, not their place in society, but that they are loved. That's like, yeah, I don't know. Nothing else matters in my book. And I mean, obviously a lot matters. I shouldn't say nothing else matters. A lot matters. But I think sometimes the problem is we get so caught up on kind of what you were saying, the morality versus the ethics, like the outside appearance, what somebody looks like. Are they going behind the beaded curtain to look at those movies? Are they being consistent in their life? And we get so caught on those outward appearances instead of like, what is actually happening internally? Like, does this person actually know that they are loved, or are they full of resentment? Are they full of suffering? Are they full of somebody telling them that they're pieces of shit their whole life because they were, more feminine than they should have been as a man, or whatever it is? Like, right. Those are the things we have to try to help heal. And it takes a lifetime to heal.
It does.
Yeah.
And go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, and we gotta have action behind words.
Yeah.
It's one thing to stand up and say that. It's another thing to be the person who shows that love. I think it's very, very important to embrace and acknowledge the hurt and the disgusting things that are being said about our LGBTQIA plus siblings, our BIPOC siblings, and to stand there for, with them, as opposed to just saying, yeah, but God loves you. So that's another one of those traps I think we can get into. So I think it's very important to stand with them, to acknowledge that they are loved by us, by this community, and that we stand with them.
Specifically. Yeah. I mean, and that's like what you do all the time, John. I know that you can't have a bunch of homeless people hanging out where you work, but yet you get to know their names and you get to know them as people. And so it's not just like this like platitude that you're putting out there, or some sort of nice thing that you say like, oh yeah, they're human too. You're actually like humanizing them in those places.
Which we try.
No, it's beautiful. Truly.
I don't try. It's so the point of all this, and I think the point of the uncertainty, is the complexity of all of it. And I don't think any of us are under the illusion that there's easy or simple answers to the problems that plague us. But I start to wonder if the Hippocratic Oath might not just be a good jumping off point. First do no harm. How about we just start there? How about we just stop inflicting pain on people for no goddamn reason other than we don't understand them and we haven't found the capacity to put ourselves in their shoes. The conversations I've had with my kids over the years, health conversations I've had with my wife over the years. We've both had to learn this. I don't struggle with these things. I'm a very fortunate cisgendered white American dude, and so I've had to try and say, okay, what would it be like though? What? And I if I was a better writer, I think of an interesting here's your sci-fi story, John. Just flip the paradigm on its head. In some other civilization where homosexuality is the norm and heteros are looked down upon, how do you force people to, be attracted to the right person or the right kind of person? If any of that were true, conversion therapy would work, and it doesn't. Turns out you can be exposed to all kinds of stuff your whole life and still, at your fundamental level, still be who you are. But if we would just start with these principles of harm reduction and autonomy, let people make the choices that are right for them, so far as they don't harm. It's really, I said it's not simple, but it is kind of simple. Up until the point where your choices impact me, I don't care. I might care in a tangential sense. I don't like it when people do things that are harmful. I'm not a big fan of drugs that are harmful. It's not my choice. And I don't know that throwing people in jail for that kind of stuff.
All right, and we've talked to a couple of different authors about that. There are other ways to circumvent those situations than to throw them in jail, to criminalize them.
Yeah, it's nuts. And again, go down the list of gender identity, sexual identity, all these things that there really are personal decisions that people make for themselves and that ultimately have no impact whatsoever, except in some weird esoteric way. We feel like, and that's conservatism to me. I know we're not going to go super political here, but that's, what are you conserving as a conservative? And as most people I know who are pretty hardcore conservatives, they're conserving a myth. They're conserving an idea of a country that never really existed, but that only ever really benefited them and people like them. And so they're clinging to that, to not losing that. Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, to make America great again, gays have to be closeted. People of color have to be put in their place, because if we go back to the idyllic 1950s or whatever the hell they want to pick, there were large groups of people in this country being mistreated for the color of their skin, for the people that they loved.
Absolutely.
And how was that great? When was that ever great?
Yeah, but if you pin any of those people down and ask them, okay, fine, make America great again. When was America great? You get those kinds of answers. Well, I feel like the 50s were pretty good. Really? My father-in-law grew up in the segregated South, and in his mind, it was great because everyone got along. But get along means everyone knew their place. So he had black friends and he had a black maid. And as far as he was concerned, everyone went home and was happy. There is that survivorship bias that comes in. Just, I survived this. I did okay. Everyone did fine. And the truth of the matter is, we've never lived up to our ideals as a country. It doesn't mean I don't love this country. Lately, I've toyed around with the idea of immigrating. I don't know where I'd go. We could go see if Promise would sponsor us to Finland.
There you go.
Actually, she's got a book coming out. Do you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I don't know. Do you know Promise Enlow?
I don't think so.
For a long time, she was on TikTok as Eve Was Framed. And I met her. So she was friendly with Keith. And I met her at a conference a couple years ago. She's an atheist, super sweet, very smart. But she and her husband left the country. They live in Finland. Tried to get her on the podcast once, and she was willing to do it. But she was in the middle of moving to Tennessee for some reason. Anyway, long story short, I'd like to get her on the show. She's writing a book called something about ex-evangelical. Her father is a very prominent evangelical, charismatic, prophetic. Is it Doug Enlow, maybe? I don't travel in those circles anymore, but I know he's in that, in that crowd. And so that was part of her not using her own name for a long time, was distancing herself from her parents and that legacy of craziness. But now that she's out of the country and she's like, fuck this, I'm taking my name back. So, but I don't know. There's something to be said for just trying to do the best you can, trying to live the best life you can, and let other people do the same. Live and let live, as Paul McCartney did not say. He said live and let die, but I think that was tongue in cheek. Anyway, all right, I've said enough.
Nice job, guys.
There's a lot of rambling. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in the country, and there's we could maybe one day when we've got nothing else to do, we could talk politics, but I don't know. I feel like that would just devolve into a bunch of angry or just a bunch of, us agreeing with each other.
Probably.
So, yeah, really.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Next topic.
A little conspiracy theory in there. And
oh my gosh. Yet another assassination attempt. Really? I don't know. Maybe it was real. I don't know. I don't wish anybody ill. Although, who was it that Mark Twain, I'll butcher his quote, but it was something like, I don't wish for anyone's death, but there are certain obituaries I look forward to reading.
Oh, man.
Yeah. It's either him or Groucho Marx. It always comes down to Mark Twain or Groucho Marx. Yeah. Outside of a book, outside of a dog, a book is a man's best friend. Inside of a dog, it's too dark to read.
Yep.
But I don't know. I don't think it'll be the end of it, because some of these people that are coming up behind scare me more. Because honestly, they're a little smarter and a little more subtle. Although Stephen Miller is not. There's some of these guys are just whacking. I'm just shocked. Have you seen how much of the Project 2025 has been implemented?
No.
It's like 60, 70% of that document has been fully implemented by this administration. Yep.
But he didn't know anything about it.
He didn't know nothing about it, but they have just went sort of headlong into all of it. So, hey, let me ask you this, politically speaking, just less politically, more human speaking, but where you guys live, have you seen a lot of ICE activity? Has there been a lot of people getting rounded up?
There hasn't been anything yet. I'm on all sorts of groups trying to figure out how to help people feel safe. I've met with the sheriff here, the Arcata police chief, the Eureka police chief, and I've got a meeting with Fortuna and Ferndale coming up soon to work through areas of immigration and undocumented peoples. But we have had no ICE. They won't know if ICE is in town unless somebody tips them off, because ICE does not have to declare their arrival.
Yeah, it's just weird. It seems like ever since What's-Her-Face got fired, everything got real quiet. Or ever since the ICE thought in Minnesota, ICE didn't be out there anymore.
I think it is more quiet, but also I don't think it's being projected as much. I think there's things like TikTok is censored so much, and other places are being censored too. So yeah, it's hard to know.
Kim and I are going to Minneapolis this weekend.
Okay.
And we'll report back what we see.
What are you guys going to do there?
I'm going to go see a baseball game.
Fun.
Because I'm a baseball nerd. I get to mark off another ballpark from my list.
The ballpark? That's awesome.
I'm going to go see the Twins play the... Shit, I don't know. Cubs?
Whoever they play?
Whoever they're playing. I don't know. Anyway, it was just it's our anniversary this weekend, so we're just getting out of town. So we'll see how it goes. Thank you. I haven't actually gone on a trip since I broke my leg, and so I'm actually walking, which is nice. I'm off the crutches.
Sweet. Cool.
Still hurts all the goddamn time. John, does your leg still hurt?
Every once in a while, it still hurts, yeah.
You walk pretty normally. I didn't know
yeah, as normal as a almost 56-year-old person walks.
It'll take you about a year to get back to like walking without a limp.
Yeah, about a year.
Keep hearing that. It sucks. I hate it so much. It's like I feel like an old dude. I'm taking my pain pills and I'm icing my ankle down at night, and anyway. But long story short, we're going to go out of town. We're going to go celebrate. This will be 35 years.
Nice.
So old awesome. AF. Something to, and then when we get back at the end of May, first part of June, we will have a new grandbaby. So
that's right.
Yay.
See how all that goes, and then
that's exciting.
Hopefully these kids will stop cranking kids out.
Did I tell you that I'm going to be a grandparent too?
You did. I'm so excited for you.
Yeah, in October.
It's going to be so cool.
It's amazing.
How's your daughter doing?
She's doing pretty good. Yeah. She's trying to figure out work situation and living situation, all the things, but she's growing this little guy. So it's pretty fun.
What are you doing, John?
I was asking if you wanted me to cut this.
Oh, you know what? It's been a good convo. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out. If you have any comments, send them to John. And, he will. He'll relay them to us. But it's been our pleasure to hang out. See you next time. Peace.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.